This PowerPoint is going over Chapter 3, Cell Structure and Function Vocabulary, which can be easily broken into 3 chapters because we've got to go over the parts of the cell membrane, and things like passive and active transport, diffusion, osmosis, endocytosis, exocytosis. So there's going to be about 35 to 36 words. Okay. The first one is cell theory. You have got to know this for your SOL. The cell theory states that all living things are made up of cells. All cells come from other cells, and the cell is the basic unit of life. Okay. Again, you will definitely be asked this on your SOL. And we're going to go over this in more detail. All of the stuff that we're going over right now, we're going to go over in more detail when we get through to the Chapter 3 notes. Okay. The second word is cytoplasm. It is the jelly filling of the cell. Cytoplasm, jelly filling of the cell. Cells can be broken into 2 groups, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotic cells are extremely small, do not have a nucleus or other membrane-bound organelles, and the DNA floats freely in the cytoplasm. The only kind of cells that we're going to go over that are prokaryotes are going to be bacteria in the kingdom Monera. All other cells are eukaryotic cells. They come in various sizes, from teeny tiny to pretty big. They have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles, and their DNA is found within the nucleus. Protists, fungi, plants and animals, all are eukaryotic cells. Organelles are small parts that carry out a specific job within a cell. You can think of organelles as the organs of the cell. Organelle, organs of the cell. One of the first organelles we're going to talk about is the cytoskeleton, where the word cyto means cell, and then you have skeleton. So we're talking about the cell's skeleton. They don't have bones like we as humans have bones, but they do have thin fibrous networks that help provide support and shape. The nucleus is the organelle that stores and protects DNA. We have the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. There's going to be 2 forms, smooth and rough. They are a network of thin, folded membranes that help in the production of proteins and other molecules. You can think of the endoplasmic reticulum as the post office, where everything is packaged up to be shipped out. Ribosomes are tiny organelles that link amino acids together to form proteins. Ribosomes form proteins. Golgi apparatus is a stack of layers of membranes that modify, package, and transports proteins. Think of the Golgi apparatus as the mailman. And the vesicle is like the mailman's vehicle. They're small sacs that carry different molecules to where they're needed to go in the cell. This one, of course, all biology students will always remember this. The mighty mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria is a bean-shaped organelle that generates usable energy for the cell to use. The more mitochondria your cells have, the more energy they produce. Vacuoles are small membrane-bound sacs that act as the cell's storage containers. So vacuoles are storage containers. Lysosomes, a lot of people usually remember lysosomes after going over a few facts about them. They are the organelles that contain digestive enzymes, so they're essentially the cell's stomach. There's lots of them throughout the cell. But they have another job. When a cell gets too old or is damaged and should not continue on, the cell will enact the lysosomes to release all of their digestive enzymes at once. So it kills the cell by digesting it out from the inside out. That's why they're known as suicide sacs, and as that is the actual term, or suicide sacs. Centrioles, we're not going to talk too much about in class, but you just have to be able to recognize them. They're cylinder-shaped organelles that aid in cell division, and they're going to help form cilia and flagella. Cilia and flagella are not vocab terms, but we will talk about them in our notes. They're going to help the cell move. A cell wall. Okay, we're going to stick mainly to plants having cell walls, but some bacteria and fungi cells have them. It's a rigid outer layer that protects and supports and helps shape plant cells. Plants also have chloroplasts that help carry out photosynthesis that stores energy from sunlight as chemical energy for the plant to use. Now, the last organelle that we're going to talk about in our vocabulary is the cell membrane. It's the thin layer that separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. You can think of it as the skin of the cell. The cell membrane is made up of phospholipids. These are components of the cell membrane made up of three parts: a phosphate group, a glycerol, and two fatty acid tails. The glycerol acts as the glue that glues the phosphate to the two fatty acid tails. In this picture right here, we have a lipid bilayer cell membrane. Each of these little red balls with yellow squiggly tails, okay, that's a phospholipid. Two layers with the tails pointing into each other. Fluid mosaic model is the description of the cell membrane when the membrane is fluid, because the phospholipids in each layer can move and slide. Not fluid as in liquid like pouring water. Fluid as in it's constantly moving and smooth, gliding around each other. I'm going to have a video posted in Google Classroom, and I'll probably show you in class, where it helps show how these proteins and phospholipids are moving around each other. Selective permeability. It means that it allows some materials into the cell or out of the cell, but it doesn't let everything. It's picky, it's choosy about what it lets in and out. A receptor is a protein that detects a signal and acts because of it. This could be a signal recognizing other cells, or a signal for the cell to release a certain type of nutrient or hormone, or whatever the purpose of that protein is. Now we're going to get into passive and active transport. Passive transport is the movement or transport of molecules without the cell using energy. Passive, no energy. Three types of passive transport: diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Before talking about those, we have to talk about concentration gradient. Concentration of something is the amount of something. So if there's a high concentration, like here on the left, there's a lot of it, to a low concentration, but there's not a lot of it. And the concentration gradient is the difference between those two locations. Diffusion is the type of passive transport that is the movement of molecules from a place of high concentration to low concentration. And it's going to go straight through the cell membrane through pores. Osmosis. Water is such a special molecule in science that the diffusion of it has its own name. So the diffusion of water is osmosis. When we talk about osmosis, we're going to talk about three osmotic solutions. This is going to be isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic. Isotonic is where solutes are equal to the amount of inside the cell as outside the cell, so the same concentration of solutes. Hypertonic, there's a higher concentrations of solutes outside the cell than inside the cell. Hypotonic, there's fewer solutes outside the cell than inside the cell. The third type of passive transport we're going to talk about on this PowerPoint is facilitated diffusion. It enables molecules that cannot directly go through the lipid bilayer, so cannot go through the cell membrane in regular diffusion. So it uses transport proteins. That's what's here in blue. It acts as a bridge, the kind of bridge that doesn't move. Your car just drives straight over it from one side to the other. In this case, larger molecules just go straight through the cell membrane without anything having to use energy. Active transport. Active transport is the opposite of passive transport. It's where the cell uses energy and it moves molecules from a low concentration to a high concentration. Three types are protein pumps, endocytosis, and exocytosis. Protein pumps are not going to be on our vocab term, but we are going to talk about them in the other PowerPoint. Endocytosis. Into, is when cells take in large materials or liquids. It's known as cell eating. We have phagocytosis. Okay, this one is specifically cell eating. The cell membrane will go out and around a large molecule and bring it into the cell. And lastly, exocytosis, where endo means into, exo means exit. So in this case, the cell is moving large particles out of the cell. The best way to think about this, and it is the grossest way, exocytosis can be like a pimple. At one point, it was under the skin. It pops and everything explodes out of the skin. Okay? So those are all of our vocabulary terms for Chapter 3.